I did used to work at a bookstore. The entire mystery section was stolen out of the store I worked on while I was on the register. So, which I thought only heightened the mystery.
Comedian Paula Poundstone today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Well, there are hundreds, thousands of biographies and history books, but very few of them have been written by a comedian. And very few comedians have written a memoir with the help of historical figures. But that's where popular comic Paula Poundstone comes in. Because when publishers approached her to write her memoir, she was hesitant till she got an idea. And the result was her 2007 book called There's Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say. Now, unfortunately, the road from concept to publication was bumpy. Just a few years into the writing, Paula Poundstone ran into some legal troubles, including allegations of felony endangerment of a child. But instead of abandoning the book, she incorporated those legal troubles into the narrative. Now, I met her in the spring of 2007 when she was on a book tour. So in just a moment, our conversation.
This is one of the more than 10,000 interviews that noted radio personality Bill Thompson did over a 30-year span. Sit back and relax, unless you're driving, in which case, keep your eyes on the road.
So here now, from 2007, Paula Poundstone.
Did it honestly, seriously take you 8.5 years to write what should have been a 1-year book?
Well, yes, actually. And there's a variety of reasons for that. The first of which is that I wrote it by hand neatly. I couldn't hand to my typist anything that had more than one cross out on it. And so that was, but it's sort of part of the process because I would rewrite stuff for neatness and then I would realize, well, there's a better way of writing that or there's, so by the time it finally did get to an editor, I was told it was one of the cleanest edits they've ever done because it was, I had really rehashed it a lot by that time. And also, I'm not an author for a living, and so I don't have designated author time in my life. And so really until like the last 2 years when I just went, okay, this has to be the priority above many other things. For example, cleaning my room, which now is a frightening. I've been at it since I finished the book. I make a little headway each day on my room, but just to get life back to how it should be.
But also, in fairness, you're a mom. You're a mother of 3 kids. I mean, I had 2 and a spouse helping me, theoretically half the time. I still couldn't get anything done. So bless your heart that you're able to write a book.
It is very hard with children around. They have no patience and understanding for mommy's work, I find. But yeah, so, and also, my book is a series of biographies of towering historic figures, and in the telling of their story, I tell my own, and therefore, I had to research each of my characters, and there's 7 chapters, each chapter of different historic figure, and I read about 4 biographies per individual. Some of them were juvenile biographies, by the way. It wasn't necessarily all that challenging, but that took some time.
I have to confess, and I hate to say I was surprised at how substantive your book was. That's kind of a left-handed compliment, but there is some real biography of these people you've written about.
Well, I didn't go to, Beethoven's birthplace or anything like that, but I did, hopefully there's, I have to trust the sources that I gathered the information from, that it's, factual, but there. By the time somebody puts the book down, you have, comprehensive, albeit brief, biographies of each of the historic figures, and I tried to throw in stuff that I didn't think was sort of commonplace in people's understanding of them. Getting through some of that Beethoven reading was almost killing me. I know nothing about music, and there's just no getting around the music stuff when you read about him.
I can imagine, though, that there might be some people maybe thumbing through the book and they'll think, how in the world is she going to make something funny out of Helen Keller and Abraham Lincoln and Beethoven and Charles Dickens? I mean, how's this going to happen?
Well, of course, there's been Helen Keller jokes for years. I wasn't the first. The whole way that the book that the conceit of the book came about is I was sitting in my car one day. It parked in front of a blank piece of paper, and there was an understanding, I think, between me and the publisher in the beginning that the book would be a funny book. That's its first goal, but B, memoir-ish, and So I'm sitting trying to write, and I realized I just felt like an idiot writing about myself. I thought, who cares? And I'm not dead, and I haven't really done anything, so it just seemed silly. But I happen to have obsessive compulsive disorder, and one of the ways it manifests itself in me is that I cannot stop talking for the life of me, which will eventually become a burden for your tape recorder. And there's no battery alive that can go up against me. So but one of the things that happens is everything that gets said, regardless of who says it, reminds me of something else that happened to me one time, and I cut somebody else off, and I'm off and running again. And so it occurred to me as I was sitting there one day, I thought, I feel silly writing about myself, but if I were to try to write about Abraham Lincoln, I would not be able to shut up about myself. And so that's exactly what I did. He was my first test chapter, and it worked just the way I thought it would. I'm telling you, I got as far as his mother died of milk disease, and I thought, boy, my mother had a headache for a really long time, and off I went. And after that, the parallels cried out. In terms of Helen Keller, fortunately, neither of my children are blind and deaf, but my oldest daughter, Tosha, has astigmatism and doesn't listen. And so I felt that I had to stop telling Helen Keller's story for a little while and express my frustration with that. And then I could get back to Helen Keller. And so that's how the book sort of came about, and that's what it is. And what's great, the unintended consequence of that is that I then had the playground of their life and times to make jokes about as well.
I have to tell you something else that I appreciated that you did in this book. Many comics over the years have written books, even memoirs, autobiographical kinds of books, and you can tell after you get 3 or 4 pages in, all they've done is take their nightclub act, their HBO special, and have turned it into a book. I'm thinking, oh, come on. This is, as far as I can tell, maybe you slipped 1 or 2 in there that I've missed from one of your specials or something. This is all original stuff. I don't remember, this is not your act, is it?
Well, I hate to say this, but a little bit of, not much, but a little bit of it is my act. And yeah, you're right. And I think maybe even when the publisher came to me, they had thought that I would write my act, and that didn't feel challenging to me, and it didn't feel interesting. And quite honestly, I don't think it would fill a book, anyways. And a lot of what I do, you kind of would have had to been there. And so that really was not what I wanted to do. And so I sort of had to, I had to wait for that bolt of lightning to hit me to realize that what I wanted to do was tell about the Wright brothers.
Well, in telling someone else's story, does it then make it easier not only to tell the parts of your own life that you wanted to tell us, but maybe the parts of your life you hadn't really wanted to tell us, but maybe if you can kind of ease into it?
Well, yeah. In fact, the truth is, the parts of my life that I hadn't really wanted to tell hadn't even happened yet when I started writing the book. This book took 8 or 9 years to write, and somewhere about the midway point, my life kind of fell apart a bit, and then I had to do a quick rewrite. And at that point, that's when I shoved Lincoln over to the second chapter and introduced in the first chapter. My book is not in any way a tell-all book, but certainly my legal experiences. I could hardly not mention that in a book about myself. So what I did was well, naturally, it came up when I went to talk about Joan of Arc, and so I dealt with it mostly in the first chapter, and the whole thing, the legal part of my life and all that, the downside of that, is about 5% of the entire book.
I think you handled it exactly right. You addressed it, you made jokes about it, you told us exactly what happened, and you moved on. I mean, that's, what else could we ask?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I've had to do in my own life as well, although the truth is I'll always be known for that. I mean, you never can exactly move on entirely. But on the other hand, it's a good sort of reminder, I think, in a way that of where to put my greater than, less than sign. What's important to me and what I want to focus on and what I want. So, in an odd sort of way, it probably works as kind of a pebble in my shoe. So.
After this short break, Paula Poundstone recalls what went wrong when they put her in charge of a store.
Are you finding this interview engaging? Curious about the book we're discussing?
Simply click the link in our show notes or visit our website, heardeverything.com, to get your copy.
When you shop through our affiliate links, you're not only enjoying great content, but also supporting this podcast.
Thank you for your support.
Now back to my 2007 conversation with Paula Poundstone.
Charles Dickens a great bookstore employee?
Yes, Charles Dickens, a fine author, and me, a great bookstore employee. I did used to work at a bookstore.
Did you really?
Yes, in Massachusetts, in Boston. And actually, I tell this in the book, but it's just true, I swear. I worked there before they had those little, the little thing that you walk underneath when you come into the bookstore, the thing that makes sure that nobody's stealing books. Well, I worked in a bookstore before those things were even invented, and the entire mystery section was stolen out of the store I worked on while I was on the register. So, which I thought only heightened the mystery of the mystery section. I thought it was a great, it was something the Stooges would have thought of promotionally. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, but yeah, they frowned on that.
Were you surprised in the writing of the book how many parallels you could find between little anecdotes from your life and an anecdote from Beethoven's or from Charles Dickens?
Well, yeah, but I guess that's as it should be. I mean, any individual, no matter how sort of, heroic or grandiose they become to all of us, they put their pants on one leg at a time. I thought it was a fine coincidence that I happened to be writing about Lincoln being shot at the theater on the very night that we were on our way to Annie. And I was able to return to my writing the following day and allow the reader to know that we came home safe. Having learning from Lincoln's experience, we protected ourselves carefully during the production of Annie.
So now have the kids read the book?
No. No. My kids are not... they only recently, my middle daughter, it's dawned on her that perhaps I mock my children in my act sometimes. And I've really tried to keep this hush-hush just between me and the audience. But my middle daughter, Allie, I let her come with me sometimes to shows. And so it finally, she was so funny. At one point, she wanted to look at the book, and I was like, no, honey, that's adult material. It's really not appropriate for children. She looked at me with this really funny look, and she went, it's about us, isn't it? It's, in part, honey, in part. But, I don't... I feel like because of the part about all the legal stuff and everything, it really would not entertain my children. It really would not. So they love looking at the cover, and they were the two older ones made me little cards on the day that the book came out to congratulate me, which is still a couple of the nicest presents I've ever received. And they were very proud and excited to go see Mom's book in the bookstore after all those years, they thought I was making it up that I was writing a book. So it was nice to, I think they thought for a moment, even the copy I had at home, they thought might have been something I jerry-rigged just to prove that I'd been working all those years.
I'm sure there must be some shop down on the Hollywood Boulevard that makes up book jackets.
Well, honestly, yeah, or you could do it on your computer, I think, or something like that. Photoshopping isn't really above most of us.
Is your celebrity a fact of life in your house? Do the kids not does it matter to them that you're famous?
Well, fortunately, I'm not the kind of celebrity that really interrupts our lives for the most part, with the exception of during the legal debacle. Fortunately, my celebrity is rather small, and so... it's not like I need shopping centers closed so that I can shop there privately or anything like that. But, oftentimes when we're walking down the street or we're at the bagel place or, just in the course of our daily lives, someone will come up to me and say that they enjoy my act. And, my kids used to look at me kind of funny over that and would wonder why those people knew me. And I kind of explained it over the years. And then it's a steady trickle more than a huge, intrusive wave. And actually, The job that I was probably best suited for in my entire life was bussing tables. I was an unbelievable table busser. Probably because of OCD. I was an unbelievable table busser. When I left the restaurant I worked at, they had to hire 2 people to cover for the work that I did because I loved it and because I had this strange disorder that made me really, really good at it. But in all the years, in all the time that I did that job, no one ever applauded me and no one ever came up to me on the street and said, hey, man, saw you working last night. You're unbelievable. And so what a treat to do a job that occasionally people come up and say that they like my work. That's great. And I think my kids kind of like that, too.
Paula Poundstone is 65 now. She still tours the country and can be heard on her podcast, Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. Now you can get your copy of There's Nothing in This Book That I Meant to Say by Paula Poundstone by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching us on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. HeardEverything.com is where you can also find my 2006 conversation with comedian Margaret Cho.
I don't know any of these good Asian things to know. Like, I'm terrible at math, didn't go to a good school, I didn't play violin, but I feel like I'm creating a new version of the Asian American woman.
And my 1992 talk with Rita Rudner.
I did commercials before I was a comedian, and at one point I had 3 running. I announced to the country that I had bad breath and dandruff and problem perspiration. People would recognize me on the street. They try to hose me down.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, if you thought the divide between the 1% and all the rest of us is something new, no. We'll revisit my 1989 interview with author and political activist Barbara Ehrenreich.
The Reagan administration sponsored something very radical, an actual redistribution of wealth, cutting taxes for the rich and cutting social programs for the poor and the working class. So the money flowed uphill.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.